welcome to my channel on the Best of Fantasy. Today I am discussing my thoughts, non-spoiler, on the Books of Babel by Josiah Bancroft. And that includes the first book, Senlin Ascends, and the second book, The Arm of the Sphinx, book number 3, The Hod King, and finally, book number 4, The Fall of Babel. Now, I was in some spoiler-filled discussions with a wonderful group of people, and you can watch them. I have them in my Bancroft playlist on my channel. And that group included Alan from the Library of Alexandria, Johan from the Library of a Viking, Ben from Overly Average Ben and Grace Dion. And if you have read the books, or if you're reading them, I highly recommend those discussions. They're a lot of fun. The final discussion was just Alan and myself, because Alan and I loved the final book, whereas our friends in the group had different feelings about book 4, which I think makes it very interesting. So if you know anything about the series, you might have heard that book 4 has a somewhat divided audience. But I loved the 4th book. I loved the entire series, in fact. And I'm going to discuss some of the things that I love about it here in this non-spoiler review. So I'd like to begin with the fact that it is a steampunk series. Although I will say I think that there's plenty of unexpected things along the way. Bancroft continuously surprised me. Each book was, in fact, different from the previous ones. So in Senlin Ascends, you meet the main character, Senlin, as the title suggests, and you get to love this character. And the scope widens a bit in the second book, Arm of the Sphinx, which is much more swashbuckling. And then things really get, I think, more theme-driven in the 3rd and especially in the 4th books, which is perhaps where somewhat the opinion divides. I don't know. These themes were definitely seeded in the earlier books, but I think Bancroft had these themes in mind all along, and in my opinion, does a great job on delivering on these themes. So that is one of the things that I love. I'm going to talk about the themes, though, in a minute. First, I want to talk about the prose, because I am in awe and admiration of Josiah Bancroft's prose. I know that not everybody cares to talk about prose, but I believe that it matters deeply. Without the prose, there is no story. And a lot of times you will find, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with this, a lot of genre fiction writers tend to have more simple prose. They want to make their books as accessible as possible, have as wide an audience as possible, make it easy or just entertaining to read, and that is great. There is a wonderful place for entertaining reads. I consider Josiah Bancroft to be doing something a little bit different with his prose. He clearly knows how to turn a phrase. There are some really awesome similes and metaphors in here, very unexpected, very imaginative. It's the kind of prose that really gets me thinking and rereading sentences here and there just because I am loving what I'm reading. So in that sense, it's not none of the books are particularly fast, and I think that is more true as the series progresses. They are not quick reads. They're not just entertaining reads. There's a lot of depth to these books, and Bancroft's prose invites you to engage with this depth in a way that I really appreciated. So yeah, if you're looking for a lighter read, probably Books of Babel, maybe not, unless you're just thinking about maybe the 1st and 2nd books, then maybe so. But things get deeper and heavier as the series progresses, so that is just something to be aware of. But if you're in the mood for a series with real depth that is really engaging, that'll get you thinking, I think the Books of Babel is right up there with the best. Now, what else do I want to talk about here? Oh, yes, of course, we can't neglect the characters. As much as I love the prose, I also probably love the characters just as much. Bancroft gives us flawed characters. He doesn't give us superhuman characters. He gives us characters who are lost and confused and struggling. And even the characters that you love the most clearly have their flaws, and this makes them all the more believable and, I think, in a sense, beloved. And it is the relationships between these characters that eventually grow on you as a reader and get you more and more, at least in my case, more and more engaged as the series progressed. And it is Also, another thing that I mentioned, the unexpected earlier, Bancroft will surprise you in terms of what he does with some of the characters. So be prepared for that sort of thing. Obviously, I'm not going to say exactly what that is, but it's not the conventional story. It is not a story that is necessarily just focused on a hero or a protagonist who saves the day kind of thing. He's doing much more than that, and there might be times when that bothers some readers, and that's something you have to be, I think, to get the most out of the series. Perhaps you need to be prepared to let go of that conventional narrative a little bit in here. So that is something that I was challenged a bit myself, to be honest, especially I would say in the third book. I was very challenged by some of the events and some of the heavier stuff that was really, it was most certainly hinted at earlier in the series, but by book 3, it got downright difficult at times for me to read. And I appreciate that. It challenged me in the best possible way, in a way that really got me thinking about some important stuff. About the way societies are arranged, about the ways in which people relate to one another, about the ways in which people exploit one another. So lots of important stuff that we engage with in this world that Bancroft has created with these vivid, very human, very real feeling characters. And I really appreciate all of that very much. And these characters, I mentioned the world, the setting of this is something different. I have not read anything quite like this before. It is called The Books of Babel. The final book is The Fall of Babel. So yes, that is very much an allusion to the biblical story of the Tower of Babel. But what Bancroft does with this is he essentially encapsulates the world in this tower. It is, in a sense, very symbolic. It is flirting with allegory, but it's not really quite allegory, I would say. But it invites you, again, to peel back the layers and apply what he is portraying in this tower to the world we live in. And I think it's just brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant the way he has this layered tower with its own hierarchies, mirroring the hierarchies of our world. In other words, what Bancroft is doing in this series is very effectively holding up a mirror to us and asking us to look deeply. And I think it's not always easy to look that deeply into what we are and how we operate. It can be very challenging at times. And I really appreciate that. So there is a layer, I think, of symbolism to this series that is pretty cool. And the themes, as long as I'm remarking on that, just brilliantly woven into these books. I mentioned social critiques, hierarchy, that sort of thing. Bancroft does not flinch from incorporating some difficult themes, things that maybe some people might be uncomfortable around just discussing as it applies to our world, but with the psychic distance that Bancroft gives us in the books, allows us to think about these things in a way that I think is very healthy and much needed in our world. So I really appreciate that. I think that he's got other themes as well, besides the social critiques. He's got friendship in there, a found family theme going strong, which I found very moving at times. There were some very emotional moments, particularly later in the series. I found myself very invested in some very poignant moments between the characters, especially at the very end, the most controversial part of the entire series. But I found myself absolutely moved, and I thought there was a certain beauty to the way that Bancroft handled the ending as well. So you can hear that I'm very enthusiastic about this series. I fell in love with it. Pretty much every aspect of it, for me, was a home run. I can see where people would kind of scratch their heads a bit at certain points, even as early as the first book, but certainly perhaps more so as the series continues. But I like that. I like that challenge that Bancroft issues in the series. And so I appreciate that, and I enjoyed it a lot. And will this series, if I ever do make another top 10 fantasy stories video, I don't know if I'll ever do that or not. Maybe I will. this one will certainly be a book that I have to put on my list to consider for if I ever do another top 10 video about fantasy. Yeah, it's that good for me. I would have to put it on the list to consider. I don't know where it would be, or if it would make the cut. It would be, who knows? I have a feeling probably it would, though. I hate to even think about all the great series that I have been reading recently, or I'm reading right now, so I don't even want to contemplate that kind of video. But if I did have the guts to do it, Books of Babel would most certainly be in contention. So those are my thoughts for now. I'd love to hear what you think if you have read the series. I'd love to hear what you think if you're considering the series. I hope that I was able to sell a few of you on giving it a try. And that's it from me for now. Until next time.